Good evening, folks. Good evening. Joe Oddo here with another episode of the Citizens Alliance for Better Candidates. This was a weekly podcast for 30 minutes. Last week we ran for an hour because we had great hosts from Braver Angels and StoryCorps. This episode here, being the one before the election, is going to be for 90 minutes, and we're going to be honored to have a few guests on with us. Hopefully the other two will join us. We got Angel Oakley, who's going to help moderate with us tonight. And we got Michael Simpson, who's running in South Carolina for Congress as a Libertarian. I'm on the ballot here in South Carolina as well with the Alliance Party. The whole purpose of this podcast is to flip the script on the big media narrative that says that we are the spoilers. No. The big two spoil it for us independents. So that's the point of this. We've been talking to nobody but independents and people working outside of the big two to try to get a fair dialogue again in the country. So we're going to start with introductions and let Angel say a couple minutes worth of who she is and why she ran for office.
Well, good evening, Joe and everyone else. I am running for Congress in Illinois' 3rd Congressional District, and I'm running as an independent. I chose to go that route because I have never seen us so divided as a country, and people have very much picked their positions of the camps that they're in, and we have lost the ability to have civil, robust debate with one another. And running as an independent allowed me the opportunity to be able to get out there on the street, really talk with people and kind of let those guard rails down, and because I could introduce myself as an independent. That was the very first thing people would ask when I said I was running was, what party are you? And for many, it felt like if I said the wrong thing, they would walk away. And having independent as that title allowed them to consider talking to me for a little bit to see if I was in their camp. And for me, I really see us at a critical crossroads in the country, that we have really important issues to tackle. We have a chronic disease epidemic that is going to cripple us financially, and also just be devastating across the board. And we have heightened tension with war abroad over the last 3 years, which has been very concerning. We have a deficit that is out of control, and that we're paying more in interest now than any of our other expenses. And we no longer have the ability for people to easily access the American dream. And things are so expensive that our children are living at home with us. Our adult children are now living at home with us because being able to start out and get a home and be able to afford basic expenses is out of reach for most children. So these are all things in which I think our federal government could easily make policies to turn those things around if they were able to work collaboratively with one another. And I do have a background that's uniquely suited to address a lot of those issues. So that's why I jumped into the game.
Yeah, if they had the will, right, Angel?
Yeah, if they had the will and they were willing to stop playing the party games. We have a duopoly system or a uni-party, however you want to put it. And the divisiveness in our country is very much manufactured in order to retain control by those individual parties. And that's why I really love candidates that are stepping up as independents or third party, because they're saying enough of this. We really need to have some alternative voices that aren't captured by corporatism and these parties that are controlled by the lobbyists. So I'm happy to help in that movement of getting ballot access for these individuals, because running for office, I did get to firsthand experience how awful it is to get on the ballot when you're running as third party or independent, and it really shouldn't be that way. And my campaign volunteers were also new. They weren't seasoned, and so they got a firsthand dose of our lack of democracy, right? And they were shocked at what they saw. Many of them were hardcore Democrats in the past.
Yeah,
And
the name
they-
of the party does anti-democratic. Wow.
Yes. So many of them, I mean, I had these sweet old ladies that were dropping F-bombs because they were like, this is terrible. And I can't believe, I mean, it was just these realizations that they were coming to, and they felt like they had been fed a lot of lies over the years. So I think that we need to get more people engaged in the civic process, and we need to wake people up out of this trance of what they're seeing on CNN or whatever news station they're watching, so that they can really get re-engaged and we can solve these problems together.
Right on. So we were joined by Justin. Thanks for joining us, Justin. And
Hey,
we're going to let
Justin.
Michael introduce himself first. We're going to come back to you in a few minutes, if that's okay. All right, Michael. So you're running Libertarian here in South Carolina for Congress. First time candidate. Tell us about yourself and why you decided to run.
Am I allowed to ask a question first? Because I grew up in Illinois and wonder where Illinois' 3rd district is.
It goes from Humboldt Park to West Chicago Fermi Labs, all the way up to Elgin's Elgin Lord's Park. So it's very gerrymandered.
Copy.
It's like squiggly.
No, I'm from Southern Illinois. I grew up in Litchfield, so I was just wondering where the 3rd district was. And when you say gerrymander, Joe loves to talk about this, which I'm sure he will later. But South Carolina 6th district, the same. I think we're in.
Not as bad as that one. I've looked at hers. It's pretty bad. And they don't even have any independents on the ballot for state, house, or senate in Illinois because they're so rigid, the restrictions that get on the ballot, which we'll cover later. But go ahead, Michael.
Thank you, Joe. Like Joe said, my name is Michael Simpson. I am also running for U.S. House of Representatives for South Carolina District 6 as the Libertarian candidate. I'll just offer here, so I'll keep it short because, Joe, you might not know this about me. I'm not a talker. I'm a listener, so I like to listen and ask questions. My website is Simpson for SC6.com. So SIMPSONFORSC, the number 6.com. And you can see my platform, what I stand for, who I am. And you can see I got the 3 of my children behind me because they really wanted to be a part of this and listen to you all as well. So,
hey, they're homeschooled, so this is a good education for them, right?
This is part of their education, and don't be afraid. I'm going to be asking questions throughout.
Right on. Sounds good. All right. So, Justin, you missed the introduction, and all we really said was that this was about the 10th or 11th episode. We've been running half-hour shows, but we're going to run 90 minutes as our closing argument before the election. So I really appreciate you joining us, Justin, because you're on the ballot for Senate, plus you're helping the Stein campaign at a pretty high level. So tell us about yourself and why you jumped in this year.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I appreciate this chance to have some third-party voices elevated because, as Angel was saying, it is a challenge for us to get on the ballot in the first place, and I could talk about that. I have a lot of experience there here in Connecticut. And then it is a challenge for us to get heard. I did get on the ballot as a candidate for U.S. Senate with the Green Party here in Connecticut. But tonight, the Democrat and the Republican are having a debate on the stage without me.
Of course. That's the way it always runs, right?
I mean, more often than not.
Right.
And so we have to work twice as hard to try and even be seen, to try and get heard, to try and people to know where we're coming from. And, that's a disappointment. But we have to work with the tools.
Yeah, what they give us.
Yeah, there is marginalization that happens. There's no denying it. And it's partly because, I think we've given control of our democracy to these, independent, agents like the media companies. They don't care. Like they'll a debate, they'll decide who they want to invite. Okay, well, these major party candidates, they've got the star power. Let's make it a 2-person debate. That'll be exciting. That'll be simple. They don't care about like making sure that all the voices get heard, right? They're not legally obligated to do that either. So until there's some kind of legal framework that says all the voices should be heard. Every candidate who's on the ballot should have a place in the debates. We could have that kind of legislation. We, the people, have the power to kind of reclaim our democracy and write the guidelines and write the rules to say we want a system that opens it up to more voices, and we could address the ballot access issues there in that regard as well. Until we do that, until we reclaim our democracy with the power we have, then it's going to continue to be kind of go with the flow. Whatever these independent hosts decide, whoever they're going to platform is what it's going to be, and we don't get hurt. And then we in the Green Party, we hear the criticism: why do you guys only run presidential candidates? Why don't you run the down ballot candidates? Hello,
Which you do actually, right?
we do. We have well over, I think, at least 160 candidates running in different races just
Right.
this year across the country. And, but one of the reasons you might not have heard of us is because, well, I didn't get invited to the debate, and maybe you would have heard of us if more of us got invited, if there was a better system in place to include us. So anyway.
Exactly. Well, we know the media. That was the opening line I used tonight. It was how the media, despite their narrative, they spoil elections for us and the big parties as well. But they're all in collusion. I remember back in 2008 when Cynthia McKinney was on the ballot, and I was on the ballot for Congress as an independent Green in Virginia, and they kept asking me, "Well, does Cynthia have a chance?" Of course they know the answer. They're trying to get me with that question, right? So I finally gave in and gave the answer that I thought was going to be reasonable. I said, no, she doesn't have a chance unless she gets on in the debates. And of course they cut the sentence right there. No, she doesn't have a chance. Bam, end of sentence. They didn't get the part where I said if she gets in the debate. That they don't go for. They chase conflict. They're never looking for solutions. So that's where we're at now. Now, Justin. So wow, and recently in Virginia too, when 3 or 4 years ago at the end of COVID, there was a sister who got on the ballot in Virginia against Youngkin and McAuliffe, and they had the same thing. Not only do they not allow you on stage, but they don't allow you in the room. She just was in the audience. Princess, what's her name? Blanding was her name, and they escorted her out. They wouldn't even let her sit in the audience. That's how bad they control things. So yeah, that's what we're up against. You're right, Justin, and that's one of the big, huge pieces of the puzzle. So if it's okay with you, I'm not sure the other gentleman's going to join us, but we were going to turn this over to Angel and let her quiz us as candidates, and she's not actually on the ballot this year, right, Angel?
Joe, I got a question.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Angel, I'm sorry, I don't want to take up much of your time, but I thought what you all said there was very important, and I think something for those of us who are different party candidates other than the major two, we need to learn how to answer questions correctly. So how would you have worded it differently, knowing that they were going to cut you off? So the answer is, if she would have been in the debates, absolutely had a chance.
Yeah, if I'd have turned it around, you're right.
Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying.
That's what we learned from 16 years ago. We do learn from our mistakes.
But that's something we can talk about that here and recognize that those were big mistakes at the time, and then say, okay, we need to figure out how to better answer the question in a way that we know the media cannot twist it. And that's a difficult thing to do.
Very difficult.
All right, Angel, I'm going to hand it off to you now. Go.
Oh, thank you so much, Joe. I'm actually an official write-in candidate in Illinois. But
oh, good.
Yeah, so I'm still technically on the ballot to some degree, but yeah, it's very difficult to win as a write-in unless you're able to.
So you'll definitely not get any media for that, right?
If I was able to get media for it, then absolutely. Going back to Michael's statement, right? I absolutely have a chance. I actually had someone say that to me when I was on the street. They said, hey, if they don't allow you on the ballot, which was what was being said prior to me even turning in any of my paperwork, said, keep going, keep going. There are possibilities to win as a write-in candidate. And I thought that that would be the case when I started talking to some of the outlets, but I've talked to a few of them and I've been interviewed and I thought it would get aired and they don't. So it gets cut somewhere. Someone's making some decision that the things I'm saying make the Democrats look too bad because I had a lot of interference and it does make them look really bad. And
One thing I will correct on what you just said is that you actually already won. You see, that's another way, Michael, that we can spin this to say, look, we who get on the ballot or who engage, we win by running, by standing on the ballot. We may not get elected. So again, the framing, the way they frame it, right? We're losers. Well, you got losers in your party too. So we aren't losers. We win by running and challenging the authorities, right?
So I think that's a great point. And Angela, I know it's a weird thing. I've never done a podcast before, so I might sound awkward and ask questions and interrupt because that's the first night to do so. And Justin and I would ask you to do the same so we can hear your voice every once in a while. But Angel, what I would say to you is consider after this, because I've been told by numerous people, Joe and I were at an event, was it last night? No, 2 nights ago.
Yep, last night.
And people say, hey, is this your first run?
Keep fighting.
Keep going. Keep going. Research the different parties and find out how you align. And there are other parties that, like, if instead of running true independent, which is very difficult, like you're describing, find a party that most closely aligns with how you are as a person and consider joining that party because there is extra help. Like Joe's in the Alliance Party. This is what they strive to do is create alliances between groups of like-minded individuals. So look at the different platforms out there, look at the different parties and see what you most closely align with and consider joining.
Well, I actually received more support than any of the other parties and got more signatures than any of the other third parties that were in the state. And actually, Chaibu, who's in the Green Party, I went out to lunch with her. I think we went out twice. We connected when we were at the State Board of Elections, and I love connecting with other people. We align on some things and maybe not on others, but sharing ideas is what's most important. So I'm definitely supportive of third parties, regardless of whether I'm in full alignment. And I have been in legislative advocacy for quite some time. And I have also served in public office. And so I do have a pretty big team. And our team was out there all the time. We were out there 17 hours some days and people knew us.
Great.
We were all over the place. And we talked to thousands. I passed out almost, more than 20,000 of our cards. So we were definitely out there talking to people and getting a lot of exposure, and more so than really the Republicans. And I think that was why the Democrats were so focused on making sure I didn't get on the ballot.
Man out of shape. You made them.
Yeah. I definitely was raising flags. Was the problem. Right. But Justin, I will say, when you said we have to work twice as hard, that's such a low ball. I mean, I would say it's like 30 times to 50 times as hard, especially when you look at in Illinois, how difficult it is. Yeah. So in your particular state, how many signatures did you have to get to be on the ballot as a Senate candidate?
Statewide, that had to be a month.
Is the Green Party considered a party where they have a reduced number compared to independents, or is it the same as independents in your state?
Well, no, any non-major party, I think, basically operates under the same requirements. So if you're not a major party, then you're a petitioning candidate. And so you have to get enough signatures that's equivalent to 1% of the vote total for that office. Here in Connecticut, it's office by office. So we can't get...
No way, 1%. That's a lot.
Well, yeah, I mean, it doesn't sound like a lot until you try to do it and you find out how much
Exactly.
it actually
We,
is.
we only needed 10,000 statewide in Virginia, man. I remember
Yeah.
that was a monster every year, but you had to do what, 3 times up?
No, no, no. Actually, they cap it. It's
Oh,
kind of reasonable in Connecticut. We're somewhere in the middle. I've seen
right.
we worked hard to try and get Jill Stein on the ballot in as many states as we could this year. You know, I'm
Right.
the field director, but I've been part of the staff since basically the beginning of the campaign, and we spent most of the campaign just trying to get, on the ballot. Like that
Well,
is
you had a late start too, didn't you? Because originally West was going to take that.
a little later than we could have liked. Yeah, West kind
Yeah.
of faked us out. Yeah, we thought he
Yeah.
was going to be the guy, and then he pulled,
Right.
he changed his mind. But we got in October. Actually, some of the deadlines came up quite early. You know,
Right.
I think one of them was like was it, I don't know, like in January or something. Some of these deadlines, and RFK Jr. was suing some of these states to say, these deadlines, you can't expect people to get all their signatures in by like February of election year. Like, that's crazy. I forget, it was like Idaho or something, but the or Utah was very early. Yeah. So anyway, the what was I saying? Yeah, the
The number that
requirements.
you had to get for
Yeah, the
yours.
requirements vary. Like Tennessee is only like 200 for president.
Wow.
It's crazy. Like, that's very doable. And then it seems the worst are some of the states with the strongest Democratic parties. Like New York, it used to be 15,000, and then they tripled it to 45,000 a few years ago. And they shortened the time window. So instead of having, most of the year to do it, you had 6 weeks. 6 weeks that you're not allowed to start until a certain time, and then you have to be done
Wow.
by the end
That's
of
what they did in your state, huh, Angel?
Yeah, Illinois did the same. They reduced it down and then we have to get a ridiculous number. So there is no cap. And I mean, for presidency, there is, but not when you're talking Congress. So that's why I was curious what yours was as Senate.
So for us, it was 7,500, which again, it's doable, but
lot.
it's a, for those of you who've done it, it's not as easy as it sounds. I
No.
can tell you that it was very hard on me, especially in July as the deadline was approaching, and we were like, are we going to make it? Are we not going to make it? We have volunteers out there. But it's very also a lot of paperwork because we had 40,000 sheets of paper to get
Yep.
500.
And they all had to be notarized, right?
They all had to be notarized, and in Connecticut, you can only hand them in to the town where the people live. So you have to have a
Oh,
stack of
man. Each
papers.
county? Oh, my
Yeah.
God.
There's 169 towns in Connecticut. You have to ask everybody, like, okay, what town do you live in?
Oh,
And then
my
you
God.
got to find the sheet, and then you fill it out. And you may get somebody from a small town, and then you have like all these sheets with only a few names on them because you're at big
Right.
events, and and each one of them has to be notarized. And we have some notaries some notaries in the party, but not as many as we'd like to. And then they have to be handed in individually to the town. So there's all this driving around. You have to do the same thing in Illinois, right? Because I know that our campaign manager was there, like trying to get all these signatures delivered in Illinois. Illinois was like 36,000, or am I confusing it with Indiana?
For the presidency, it
For the
was
presidency.
25,000 minimum, but you could turn in an unlimited number because of course they're going to contest them.
I'm gonna ask a new question.
Go ahead.
I'm going to ask a newbie question. So, as somebody who's new to this political game, and I find it absolutely fascinating, which is sad. Number one, what does it take for ballot access to be guaranteed for your party?
Guaranteed for what?
There is nothing that guarantees you because even Bobby Kennedy
Right.
in Illinois, he got 85,000 signatures and the requirement was 25,000. And we self-struck 20,000 of them and only turned in 65,000. And they challenged almost every single one. They
The
went
reason
through and they challenged. We had to sit there for weeks on end, going to Springfield, paying, or getting volunteers to go down to Springfield and sit all day long looking at every signature, trying to kick it off. And I will tell you that when you have that many signatures, the state people were not very patient and they weren't
No.
trying to really look robustly. And I was a little annoyed because I've gone through that process before. And when there's a lower signature, threshold, when there's less to look at, they're actually very gracious. But when you have that many and they're under an immense amount of pressure to do it quickly, they're not going to try to find a name for a while. So there was a lot that went on that, there were a lot of names that got struck that shouldn't have gotten struck, just because of the behavior that was going on in there. And then on top of it, so after weeks of doing this, they brought the signature count down to 33,000. And mind you, again, this is way more struck than should have been struck, but it got it down to 33,000 and he only needed 25. So he was still 8,000 above. And then they were so desperate that they started subpoenaing every single circulator to try to prove fraud on these circulators to kick off all the signatures from that particular circulator, which is a violation of the First and 14th Amendment right of even the voters. I mean, you have people living in the state that have signed these petitions and their signatures are getting tossed because these jerks are trying to play politics. And they created a PAC called Clear Choice PAC that was run, I believe, by Biden's former campaign manager. And all the millions of dollars that they raised in Clear Choice was solely just to kick off the third party candidates for president so that it was only between Biden and Trump. That was their number one mission.
Yeah, that was what was
So-
funding the lawyers and litigators, right?
Yeah. So I was sitting side by side with people that were getting paid hourly
Right.
from Clear
Exactly.
Choice. And so it doesn't matter how many signatures, to your point, it doesn't matter how many signatures you get. If they are determined to kick you off, they will go to any length to make your life miserable for as long as they can until the deadline, the absolute drop dead deadline to print the ballots. Because we were fighting this all the way up until they're printing the ballots.
Right.
And that's absolutely ridiculous, unconstitutional. There's just so many violations. And it's appalling to me that that's their behavior and that they can at the same time go on TV and say that they're saving our democracy. I mean,
Right.
it makes me so angry and I try to keep my cool about it, but it's really just gross.
Right. And Michael, going back since you're new, you may not even have heard about real close to us. I mean, we're lucky in South Carolina. The parties that we're on have already gone and got 10,000. And they reach
That's my
And,
question.
get away with it.
he, in the Jill Stein campaign, had to face a lot of lawsuits in a lot of different states. And of course, that also accomplishes helping to drain our resources because then we have to spend money
Exactly.
on
Both
lawyers.
time and money.
It's very
Yeah.
expensive. And
Yeah.
they have deep pockets, so they can hire all these
Exactly.
high-priced lawyers to wage all kinds of lawsuits. One case in Nevada we brought to the Supreme Court and somehow didn't win because we should have won on the grounds. I don't even understand how that was possible. So most cases we prevailed because most cases these were frivolous, like groundless lawsuits, and we prevailed on the grounds. But we still had to spend a lot of money. So the mission is accomplished.
So she did make the ballot in New York and North Carolina?
Jill did not make the ballot in New York. The requirement there, 45,000, was just undoable for us,
Right.
and we tried really hard. We got like
Yeah,
40.
Kennedy used up all the resources on that one.
Well, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
45,000 is not easy. We don't have
No, I know.
we don't have deep pockets. You know, the Green Party, we don't take any corporate money or PAC money. We only have grassroots funding from individual donors capped at 3,300, you know, and
Wow.
that's it. So, and now we did
So
have,
that's a hand behind your back right there.
And Illinois, she didn't get on in Illinois either.
nope,
Really? Oh, man.
no, Illinois was another, and we got a high rejection rate in Illinois, which jibes with what you were saying there.
But you did squeak on in North Carolina, right?
We're still, I think we were still good in North Carolina thanks to Matt Hogue winning
Yeah.
that case a couple of years ago.
Oh,
because
yeah. Okay. That's
that
good.
that state has ballot access for the whole party in all the ballot lines. Here in
Oh,
Connecticut,
good.
it's state by state. I mean, it's office
Right.
by office by office.
All right.
If you're running for a small office, you need a small number of signatures, but you only get ballot access for that office.
Right. Gotcha.
And then if you get 1% of the vote, you keep that ballot line. To answer Michael's question more generally, I think for us to get it here in Connecticut, I think we'd have to win like 20% of the vote in a major statewide election, something like that. So it's very difficult to see how we, you know, I hope we get there, but in the meantime, we have to fight office by office. And
Virginia needed 5% of the statewide vote to retain ballot access, which is one of the reasons why we have to run people at the top of the ticket. They keep
That's in South Carolina. But I've seen Chase have to go across the country and try to get ballot access to the different states because apparently libertarians don't have it there. So that was
Well, fortunately for you libertarians, you have money with the Koch brothers backing, which Justin's party and Boy Angel on her own up there. No such
that's
thing,
why that's
right?
why the question, because I, you know, as a newbie, I don't understand all that stuff. So, you know, I'm still learning.
It's a learning experience, and we appreciate you jumping on the ballot to learn, man. And so you can pass it on to your next generation there, and then help them, you know, fight the system, brother.
They're on it. They're already better than me, and this is a learning process for all of us. But again, you know, so we talk about this, and this is a podcast. Where is the freedom of the press? Why is the press not taking the story? Like
The media doesn't want to cover this for the most part. I will say that they're very strategic in how they do it. So as an example, I mentioned earlier that I was interviewed. I had interviews with the Tribune, NBC, and it wasn't aired. And I think it got cut. But then interestingly enough, they did do a huge expose. They did a huge story on it that was 4 to 6 pages long about how difficult ballot access is in Illinois. And I was like, oh, that's fabulous. So I'm reading through it thinking maybe I'll get mentioned in there or Bobby will get mentioned.
Of course
Nothing.
not.
No, we didn't. They actually talked about the primary and all the shenanigans that went on in the primary. Why? Because that was months ago and there's nothing anyone can do about it. It's over. And
Well,
so
there's
if they had
building
listed,
collusion. That's why
if
they
they had
don't do it.
listed what was going on now, then people could actually write in those candidates, right? Or do
Right.
something about it to sort of a vote of opposition. But they listed all the things that went on in the primary, which really, it's telling people that yes, there's a problem, but again, most people aren't going to be mobilized to do anything about it, and there's nothing before them to do anything about it. So they're kind of strategic in what they're willing to talk about and when. And clearly it's because they're looking to favor whatever candidate or whatever control mechanism is in place in that particular media outlet.
Well, what it is
So-
the bigger picture of collusion of, look, this is where they get their revenue. We're up against the biggest two fundraising organizations in the world. They spend all these ad money with these media outlets, so they can't dare, give us an inch. That's just the unwritten rules of the game, But I mean, think about, why does Raytheon advertise for Good Morning America, right? Who's going to buy their weapons, right? Well, what they want is make sure nobody's on that network talking about peace. Let's make sure America's enthusiastic for war. That's the whole point, right, Justin?
Well, I mean, it's good to, yeah, we aren't on an equal playing field of discussion. So again, we have to work really hard to try and. I appreciate things like this, like the podcast you're doing here, to give a chance for more people to hear about the challenges that independents, libertarians, Greens all share, trying to break what is a really bad system, this two-party system. I like a quote from John Adams that says, a division of the Republic into two great parties would be the greatest political evil under our Constitution. And I don't think they quite realized that they were setting us up for a two-party system when they set us up with plurality voting. Ranked choice voting hadn't been invented yet. That was a development in the 19th century, but a lot of other places have taken it up. Australia's had ranked choice voting for a century now, and as a result, they have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 parties in their legislature. They have a multi-partisan democracy now, so you can you can find the party that fits you best, and you can join it, and you can actually get represented in the government with real power, like with real representatives. Here, we don't have anything close to proportional representation. We have winner take all electoral college. We have, single member districts. We have plurality voting. So the way the system is set up in so many ways, we end up having the same argument every year about who has a chance of winning. Well, if they don't have a chance of winning, I'm not going to support them. Like, that's the first question the press is asking. That's the first question a lot of voters are asking. Is like, oh, okay, well, if they're only polling at 5%, I'm not going to support them. And then it becomes a self-perpetuating cycle, even if they like that candidate the most, because they're just worried about who the two front runners are, because they know they only get one vote. But with ranked choice voting, you can vote what you want, first choice, and then you still have that second rank backup vote, so you can still have a say. If your first choice doesn't come in first, your second rank vote goes into effect, and you can now have a voice about who you prefer among the remaining candidates, among those top two candidates. You still have that leverage, that bulwark against what you might perceive as the greater evil, but at least you get to vote first on your ballot for what you really want. And
Justin, have you looked at approval voting? Have you compared that out to ranked choice voting?
I'm not as big a fan of approval voting. I think, I'm a big anti-plurality voting fan. I've heard some people advocate for star voting, which is kind of like between approval and ranked choice. Approval voting, as I understand, is basically yes or no, but you don't really get to rank the candidates. I don't think it's as expressive
Does
as
that give you a none of the above option?
Hey, well, you can just not check any of them. So yeah, I guess that's none
Well,
of the
that is the
above.
Libertarian
So
Party. However, Justin stole my conversation, so I'm taking it back.
sorry, Mike.
Just kidding. So you segued really nicely into ranked choice voting, but I wasn't ready to go there yet. So Joe is a great advocate for ranked choice voting, and I think it's a brilliant idea. There's an inherent problem which I want to come back to, but let's go back to the freedom of the press. Joe and I recently had interviews with a TV station down in Savannah. So they are doing Savannah, which is the low country, and we're in the low country. So they did the District 6 and probably District 1 of South Carolina as well. I went on their website and couldn't find any of our interviews. They had the two folks from the Georgia area that were in their district and none of the other interviews. So I'm trying to figure out where that went. And it goes a long way to, how do we fix this press issue? And once we get this one done, then I recommend we go to ranked choice voting because that was
well,
Well,
I don't
Michael,
think
it's
there's
not really a
actually.
freedom of the press thing. It's, yeah, go ahead, Angel. I
Yeah,
think
I was
it's
going to say,
more
I
of a-
don't think there's a matter of us being able to fix. We can't fix the press.
Right.
What we can do is we can actually change the way we do elections. And I'd love to actually, instead of segueing, I'd love to segue into solutions. And even if
Right
we
on.
look at like how we have ballot access, some of the solutions that we look at for that is being able to actually go to a digital, like we're able to basically log in. So in Illinois, we can go to il.gov, and we can set up an account for the state, and then we can submit witness slips. So when I'm upset about a particular piece of legislation that's being discussed, I can go in and I can submit a witness slip saying I object to that, or I can say, hey, I'm in favor of that. And we could do something very similar for getting people ballot access. We could just use those same types of accounts where we allow people to go in, set up their account, and this way we're actually improving citizen engagement, right? We're training people how to be engaged citizens with their government and to go in, create that account, and then they can see who they've signed for. And it makes it a lot easier on the government side, because then you don't have people objecting to signatures and spending weeks on end using our federal funds to pay people to look at whether signatures are valid or not valid. And it's all real time. It's just a lot better overall. And plus, people don't want to answer their doors anymore with Ring doorbells. They look and they see somebody with a clipboard and they have to sign a paper and you have bad weather out or whatever. People are like, I'm not answering the door. So this circumvents all of that, and it allows us to move smoother into this digital age. I think a lot of people don't want to, they're a little apprehensive about this idea of digital ID or digital tracking. And I'm not suggesting that we have vote tracking, but for petitioning and getting people access to the ballot, this is definitely something that I think we should be championing across the board, with all of the third party and independent candidates getting behind pushing that through legislature. Because if we could get that part done and we could get ballot access, that would be massive move forward. And then if we could, as far as getting money out of politics, if we could somehow do a collective fund that allows a platform for basically a ballotpedia type of situation, but where candidates can actually manage all their data. So you're getting essentially a free website, then we circumvent the media, because we're saying, no, you're not going to go to the media. We're going to allow candidates to put all of their campaign information on this particular website, manage it. It's all going to be a fair and open and free platform. And then you just have people sign, who they want to be on the ballot. And that person then gets that extended period of time to have all their data up on that website. So then we don't have to worry about trying to change the media, because I just don't think that that's possible.
So you took it back.
it's-
And I like that. You took it back to the ballot access thing. And to me, one of the inherent risks of what Justin was talking about with this ranked choice voting, and I think Joe, we all need, this is a very serious and very good discussion, is ballot access. is you can't, or you're going to choose write-in one. Like you need ballot access in order to actually have an effective ranked choice voting. So ballot access has to be fixed. And I like your solution thoughts, your solution analogies. But ballot access really has to be fixed in order for ranked choice vote to work the way that we think we want it to. Because if you can't have a person on your ballot and you're stuck writing something in, people don't remember that. They always, I got to do 1, 2, 3. I got to write in a name. Crap. I can't do that. My brain doesn't remember that. So that needs to be solved in order to make this digitally feasible, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'll just say I agree that petitioning should be digital. Actually, when I ran for Congress, I was a Democrat until about 2019. So for about 30 years, I was a Democrat. And in 2019, I joined the Green Party. In 2020, I decided to run for Congress. I was just going to support whoever was running, and then I found out there was nobody running. I was like, well, I guess I'll do it. And
Plus, that was COVID made it hard to collect, right?
yeah, that was the thing. So it was COVID, and there were no major gatherings. It was 2020.
Right.
And I thought, okay, well, could we accept electronic signatures on our for our ballot access, for my ballot access? And the state Secretary of State said, well, we don't have a way of doing that, but if you come up with something, maybe it'll be all right. Maybe we'll accept those signatures. So I actually
Wow.
set up a system with like Adobe Sign, and so that, and I had a little bit of technical help so that it actually submitted electronic signatures as part of my signatures that year. So
And they accept them?
and they accepted them. So
Wow.
Wow.
because you
Very
have
good.
some verification in the process, there's like there's date stamps and there's like email verification. So
Right.
people sign legal documents, like real estate contracts
Exactly.
and things electronically. The technology's there, and so they they don't make it easier because they don't want to make it easier.
Yeah, exactly.
100%.
Yeah. And in fact, we just see them making it harder, like tripling the requirement in New York. So we need a national standard. It'd be great if Congress had the capacity or the will to set some kind of national standard and to get these states to do the right thing. Until then, we have to fight state by state for better laws. And, that's big part of our agenda as minor parties and independents is electoral reform.
Exactly.
People want it. People are tired of only having two choices. They know that, but they don't always know that there are these solutions. They don't always know that there are a few simple reforms that could really change the things. If we want to put everybody on an equal playing field, we have to build that playing field. We have to make it a reality and set the parameters. And so, it is doable. It's not that hard. But the powers that be, the people that are benefiting from the two-party system don't have much motivation to pass the reforms
Yeah.
that are going to bring minor parties. They don't want the competition. They're doing the opposite. They're suing us to get us off ballots. They're raising
Right.
ballot access requirements. So we have to get our message out to the people who want a better system, who want more than two options, that they can have it. And if we can win their vote, then we'll have the power to bring that system into being. We have the solutions. Yeah. So
So
Hey.
Justin, thank you for leaving the Democrats, man.
Yeah.
But let me ask you now, we had a Reclaim Democracy conference in DC back in like 2002 or somewhere, way back then. And I still have 10 things, the National Election Reform Platform, that I've been tweaking over the years and check, we got one. Hey, but in some states, right? Like IRB and Election Day holiday, the same day voter registration. Some places you can do that, And so yeah, that's what when I'm on the campaign trail, those are some of the things I advocate for. And then I do see these parallels with those of us who are running outside, we cross over on a lot of these same issues. Even Bill Redpath, the Libertarian former national chair, he says, yeah, I agree with 30-40% of the Green Party platform. So there is a lot of crossover. I think it's going to take a synergy of us outside of those two somehow, some way, which is why we're piecing this together, why it's good, encouraging this year to see people like Good Party come together and help independents. They claim that the 1,000 people are going to get elected for local and municipal offices this year.
Right.
You got Andrew Yang out there pitching forward, a lot of good movement on our side. So, these are all good signs, don't you guys think?
Yeah, but I do want to make one caveat there that about Andrew Yang. I do not. There's an important difference between open primaries and jungle primaries, and we in the Green Party do not support jungle primaries because the jungle primary is just a way of weeding out people before so they can't make it to the general election.
Yeah, no independence on the end. Yeah, on the general. Right. I don't agree with that one either.
So I don't like the jungle primary system. I don't think an open primary system is a different thing, and I don't even think there's advantages to that either. I believe that what we need is more parties. Let the parties be parties. Let them decide who they want their nominees to be, and then put those nominees
with ranked choice.
Put those nominees on the ballot with ranked choice for the general election. We have our campaign manager, Jason Call. He for the Jill Stein campaign. He's
on the ballot for Congress too, up in Washington, right?
Yeah, up in Washington, he ran for Congress and he got eliminated in the jungle primary.
Okay.
And so he doesn't get to go. He doesn't get to be on the. He doesn't get to be a candidate in the general election anymore. So whoever can win out in that primary gets to move on to the general. But the minor parties, the ones that don't have maybe the resources to do the advertising to win that jungle primary, we still get excluded in the end.
Mm-hmm.
So
all right, I'm gonna bring this back to the newbies because I have a question for you, Justin. I do not understand what jungle primary means.
A jungle primary is they have where all different kind of candidates from different parties are all in the primary ballot together. And in some ways, it sounds like a nice idea. So, but basically, the top four or the top two, in some cases, only the top two.
California, top two, right?
Top two in California. So everyone votes in one primary. All the candidates from all the parties are in that primary, and only the top two advance to the general election ballot. Everybody else.
Which means they could have two of the same party. Like in California, it could be two Democrats that advance.
Well, there's something interesting there, right? So that's almost like ranked choice voting, except you called it a jungle primary. However, if you had something in place to where they said, hey, you can only have one party or one candidate per party, and then do the jungle balloting, you're good.
So it's often called an open primary, right, Justin?
Right.
I mean, your jungle primary, open primary.
Oh, so they're the same thing?
They're not exactly the same thing. In my understanding, an open primary means, like, for example, an open primary in Connecticut might mean that independents can vote in the Democratic primary or they can vote in the Democratic Party primary. Like, they can choose which party primary. You don't have to be in the party to vote in that party's primary. So it's still party primaries, but they open up who's allowed to vote in them to more people, which I don't quite understand, because, like, if you want to vote in that party's primary, why not just join that party? And then a jungle primary, again, is where they do away with party primaries. There are no more party primaries. It's just one primary with everyone in it.
Mm-hmm.
And, it sounds like maybe it might be a good system at first glance because, maybe then you'll have the top two is horrible. Like, the bigger the number, maybe the better. Like, if you have 4 or 5, you're getting better. But I still think parties are a good idea myself. Like, I think the problem is not, I think the solutions are not doing away with parties. I think that the solutions are putting the different parties on more of an equal playing field. And I think so for that, I think we keep party primaries, but and then they all get to be on the general election ballot. They all get to be considered for election, but with ranked choice voting, they're more of a consensus candidate with the most support is going to win.
So let's say this, and let's talk about legislation here, because we have this opportunity. This primary thing that you're talking about, if there's a maximum number of Democrats or Republicans or any other party who can put somebody in this jungle primary, right? So you have a maximum of 2 per party. So they put them all in this jungle primary, and who are all the Democrats going to vote for? 2 Democrats, and 2 of something else. I don't know. And all the Republicans vote for the 2 Republicans and 2 of something else. I don't know. I think that helps lower party candidates such as ourselves.
Yeah, but then you'd have to have an additional election, because if you're talking about a statewide race, how do you even choose, in the Republican Party or the Democrat Party?
He's not. He's talking about a primary system. So this gets to the.
Well, but you mentioned just allowing the Republicans to be able to put 2 into that primary jungle. And what I'm saying is, if you have 10 people, like when we have Republican primaries or Democrat primary, sometimes you can have 10 people that run for the Republican seat, right? And if those 10 people are running for that Republican seat, that's the primary, and we only pick 1 out of those 10.
Well, they should run prior to them. They should figure who their 2 are.
So then you're saying, well, who determines that then? Who's determining who those?
Yeah, it sounds a little limiting.
Well, I'm just saying.
We're not trying to limit people from participating. That's one of the problems we have now. Civics not being taught anymore, Michael, as you can relate to this, the liberties that we're losing. If we don't teach it to the next generation, they're not even going to know they lost their liberties, right?
I agree with that, and I understand that. However, we're talking about a system where if you have to have 4 to be able to be on the ballot in November, and we're talking about a ranked choice or jungle primary, to where, hey, if the Republicans, if you have a maximum of 2, you figure out your 2 before the primary happens, and then those are the 2 that are on the.
Well, you're mixing it up, and that's a little not as easy as it sounds, because even if you had 5 people that wanted to run for the Libertarian primary, you'd have to have a convention or something to decide. So you still have to have a mechanism to pare down and agree. So you're mixing the 2 up.
That's what we have. We don't do primaries. We have a convention where we.
Yeah, but we're talking about, this is one state, and we're talking a national. So we're addressing as a group here, and some of our allies who we're aligning with around the country. Actually, I don't know if you guys have heard of us coming up with a fulcrum caucus, where if any of us got elected, like it would only take 6 to 8 of us to change the fate in Congress, right? So if we got even 1 who didn't want to caucus with those, with the R or the D's, or if we got 5 up there elected, independent, green, libertarian, if they just caucus with themselves together, they would make the other 2 have to come to the table and start talking, right?
Absolutely, but that's the point. You don't need
You hear, but it's
Decided that, you you need a good number of people. But given how close our legislature's been and, like in the House, yeah, if we had 5 or 6, then that we're really willing to listen to every issue and not necessarily vote party line, then yeah, you end up having a lot more power.
I guess I'm thinking more at the federal level because really, and I agree with your math and state level and all that, but at the federal level, you need one. You need one separate party from the other two in order to get the ball rolling. And that one person who disagrees with both of those means that they have to start coming together to understand. So one way or another, it will get figured out because that one voice will make a difference as the minority leader. They'll get more press, they'll get more understanding, they'll get more time to put the word out there that what we need done.
And that's actually kind of, if you look at how the Freedom Caucus is operating and how the squad, so you've kind of got the squad and you've got the Freedom Caucus, and those two are doing something sort of similar. They're trying to pull themselves out of that duopoly situation and say, hey, we're gonna, this is Justin, yeah, kind of. I mean, they do for some legislation, they prove effective for that.
I think the Liberty Caucus has shown more kind of willing to dig in than the squad has on a lot of issues. I don't know. There was a lot of excitement about Medicare for all, which is something that Bernie Sanders had talked a lot about, and a lot of the squad had talked about as being part of their platform. And then when they got into office, a lot of people who supported that policy said, hey guys, you have an opportunity here to move that issue forward if you want to, because there's going to be an election for Speaker of the House, and you have the opportunity to make some demands. Before you vote for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker, you could make some demands. We saw this recently with the Republicans when they went through like 30 rounds of voting for their Speaker until they got the concessions they wanted, and or at least some of them. So small numbers of people in a party do have some points of leverage that they can use at specific times, and that's one of them when you're announcing the Speaker. But for whatever reason, and that initiative was called Force the Vote, and the demand was, hey Nancy, let's just at least have a vote on this, okay? Can we just have a vote on so that everyone will see where everyone stands on the issue? It may or may not pass, but it'll generate a discussion. We'll see where people stand, and then there will be consequences depending on how much support people want to give to this issue. So a lot of people were hoping that members of the squad would stand up and withhold their vote for Nancy as Speaker until she agreed to that. Just agree to a vote on Medicare for all, and they wouldn't do it. I don't know what kind of pressure gets put on these people once they get into
the money pressure, man.
A lot. I think it's also the retribution. So if you look at how they fund those campaigns, I mean, it's amazing to me how the money filters through. Like in Illinois, with this recent bill that they just passed, 4488, they changed it so that the parties can funnel as much money as they want into a primary candidate, but it's always been such that the parties can funnel as much money as they want into a general election candidate. So they definitely control them from saying, if you don't vote this way, you're getting primaried. We're going to take you out in the next election. You're done. And so they know that they're not going to get supported. And so they toe the party line. That just is sort of the way it is. And
which is why four members of Congress this year got primaried out. 2 of them Democrat because they had the audacity to support Gaza.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's brutal.
It's just so, I think to Michael's point, which is why one, non-duopoly candidate in Congress would make a much bigger difference than having, a few fringe members within one of the major parties. Because they're beholden to the party leadership, they're under that pressure. They don't want to embarrass the leadership of their party. They're told, don't say anything that's going to make us look bad. The party loyalty, it becomes a more powerful force than loyalty to their principles, loyalty to what they're supposed to be there to be fighting for. And so someone who's there outside of that party system as an independent, libertarian, green, whatever it is, they're going to be going in there fighting for what they believe in. And, their loyalty is to their party's platform and they're not beholden to that power structure. So,
But
gosh,
what about committee appointment though, Justin? I mean, when you go to DC as an independent, if you don't pick caucusing with either the Republicans or the Democrats, you don't get appointed to a committee because they're the only ones that have committee power. So unless we had a handful of them where we could actually have some
if it was
presence.
enough that the spread is only 4 right now. If you had 5 independents that would make the difference of a vote swing one way or the other, that would be huge.
Well, that's
Right.
the-
I'm wondering about the committee appointments because I don't know what it would take to have a group in which you could actually then appoint to committees, because you understand what I'm saying?
well,
Like,
yeah,
Yeah,
in order to get on
they may
in
not
order to
have to
get
be
into
on committee.
appropriations or get into
Yeah.
any of these particular committees you want to get on, you have to be appointed by the chair.
take a
Exactly.
step
They may not be invited to any of the committees, you're right, but they would
Sure.
still have the leverage of the vote.
However, what you have to understand is that one voice, another party, a true independent, one voice is the minority party leader. That person, whether they're on a committee or not, and they can go out there and speak to the press because as the minority party leader, I can come up to you and say, hey, I got something to tell you.
Unless their vote was enough to make a difference in the outcome of a bill passing,
Mhm.
unless that they had enough clout, like they were the actual difference maker, like the vice president is if it's a tie, then the press isn't going to even talk to them.
Well, I think you're underestimating the power of one, and I get it. I understand it's a difficult road to hoe, but wow, it would be a powerful message, and I think we're
Well, then we should all be making calls for the guy in Nebraska and get him elected to Senate. This is independent this week.
We should.
Yeah, because I think that they can block you out pretty. If you look at what happened with Marjorie Taylor Greene, so Marjorie, when she came in, they wanted to just block her out, so they didn't put her on a committee. They wouldn't put her on any committees. That was sort of the punishment. And so she went and sat in session, and she was learning about all this. And she looked around and she's like, "Wait, why doesn't anybody come for a roll call vote? Like, why isn't anybody coming in to vote?" And then she realized that she could be in session and say, "Hey, I'm going to require that they do a roll call vote." And so she started doing that and pissing them all off because then they had to come out of their committee meetings or come out of whatever it was they were doing. They actually get to come down to the floor and vote on stuff. And so then they decided to put her in some committees, right? Just to stop her from doing that. So, I mean, you end up having to find some way to be a rabble rouser, I guess, if you don't get appointed. But you have to be in a committee in order to be working on policy, unless unless you just see your job as going to Washington and just being a voter. But a voter is, I don't know, that's just partial.
No, it makes sense. Like you just pointed out the game within the game, and Marjorie Taylor Greene figured that out. Good for her. It's not something that we can't learn from and do ourselves if elected. Be the
Yeah. I mean, she found out that you needed to be sort of a pain in the ass to somebody, because otherwise they just ignore you. And, I really struggled with that when I was out campaigning because I told people are just so sick of the divisiveness and the craziness, right? They're like, so I had people say to me, "Well, you're not crazy, are you? Like, are you common sense?" And I said, "Yes, I'm not going to be crazy doing this nutty stuff." And then, I realized, darn nabbit, maybe I do need to be a little crazy. I mean, I'm generally not, but like I don't get press because I'm not crazy. And maybe you just need to be a little crazy because those are the ones that get the media.
Yeah, we have one here in South Carolina, Nancy Mace, who's really good at finding that camera.
I guess I wanted to throw in a thought here about power in general, and that, I do think breaking into Congress for independents and who aren't caucusing necessarily with either of the major parties and are truly independent or minor party is a worthy goal, and that'll be a milestone on the way to having hopefully even more power. But to get there, we also need to keep building our community of our base of power at the local level. And you know, I've seen as part of the presidential campaign, people say, "Well, why are you running for president? Why are you running for lower offices?" And we are running for lower offices. And like I said, it can be it's a struggle, but we run those presidential races and those higher ticket races for a number of reasons, and one of them is to maintain ballot access in certain states where you have to run that race to get ballot access, but also because it is a high profile race, and those high profile races get attention, and you get a standard bearer who gets more attention than someone like me is going to be able to get these lower races. But so the point is to draw people into the party, because what we need
they're recruiting tools, in other words. You got to recruit.
It's like advertising for your party. It's kind of like
Right.
saying, here's a great standard bearer who speaks what we as a party believe, and if you like this, come join us. I mean, this is a major goal of our presidential campaign, is to parlay all the new people that we've met and the new energy we've got, and to keep those people engaged and building power. Because what we've seen with the Jill Stein campaign is a lot of where we can get more action happening is where there's already a long established Green Party that's been working for years to have a membership that knows how to do things, that knows how to campaign, that knows how to get on ballots and so forth. And so, when we don't have a strong party in place to support the presidential candidate, it's much harder. The presidential campaign can't do everything. The major parties are the same way. They depend on their ground troops, right? So, we need to build. My goal in my life is to build out, the Green Party, wherever I can. I'm a co-chair of the national party now. I'm one of 7 co-chairs. I'm also a co-chair of the state party here in Connecticut. But after November 5th, my eyes are going to be focused on Connecticut. I've seen some small towns here where we have lots of people, like Wyndham and New London, particularly, are 2 towns where we broke past we got the momentum going. The local people there are running candidates for local office every year. They get known in town. They build up, and that snowballs, and they get enough momentum to keep themselves alive year after year. To keep the ballot lines and to attract new members. So, I just wanted to bring that in, that I think we have high goals. I worry about big problems, worldwide problems, peace and war and climate, and problems that need to be solved at the national level. But we can't build the power to do any of that without also building up local power, and focus on local issues, and then focus on state issues. And, we need numbers, we need people. And
Exactly. It's really hard to recreate that every time if you don't have an ongoing momentum. That's a good point on your, Justin, because, and like you say, unless you're out there on the street, when you're collecting them signatures, that's when people are like, what are you up to? What's your platform? Oh yeah, I like that. Let me sign up. And then that's really where you find your next candidate for a local office, right?
That kind of leads into citizen engagement, right? And how we really get citizens engaged. And that was actually a big part of my platform when I'd go out and talk with people. Because if you notice, our representatives don't tend to poll us on all their voting ahead of time, right? They don't say, hey, to the electorate, hey, what do you think of this particular one? Put in your vote, and then I'm gonna vote that way. I mean, here in Illinois, we've had 100,000 witness slips submitted against something, and then our representatives turn around and just disregard those and vote their party line. So I'd love to have a platform in which everybody has their account, and they can go in and they can see everything that's coming down the voting pipeline. And I can do a video on, maybe breaking it down, and then they can have a link to read it themselves, so that we're not doing this polarization and spinning of bills in the media, and that's the only way people get information, that they can actually go in and hear from their representative and see the bill themselves, and then they can submit their opinion, or if they have experience in that particular area, that they can say, hey, I have raised their hand, I have experience, and I love to help on a committee to make tweaks or modifications to make this a better bill, and really engage citizens. And if we could do that, and then the reason that I think our representatives don't do it is because then it would challenge the power structure and that they wouldn't get the outcome that they're looking for. But
I'm
if we could
impressed
really
considering-
do that, then we would get citizen engagement, and then we would see
Right.
who's participating, and these people would have a better understanding of the civics process, and then we would have a better pipeline for people to run, and we wouldn't have so many, newbie. We would be filtered, right?
So, Illinois, Angel has the hardest. Like, Angel is against maybe one of the worst states in the union with regards to corruptness in the state of Illinois. You and I are in a close second race with this whole gerrymander thing, and I hope you segue to that next, because you have fascinating arguments on that, and I'd love to hear Angel's arguments as well, and even Justin's in Connecticut, because I'm not that familiar with Connecticut. But what she's saying is, like, Illinois is getting rid of those complaints. There's a problem with the system. It's a brilliant system in theory, but they're not adhering to it.
But it's in
We
place
have a
now,
basic-
Angel?
Well, so we have a basic structure. The basic structure is that people can log in, they can create an account, and they can create a witness slip to object to. But there's a
Right.
very, very short window of time. It's not widely used. It's a
And it's
basic
probably
system.
not widely advertised either.
Well, people have no idea, and people don't know that they can even set up an account. I would be shocked if there's more than 30,000 people that even have an account set up.
I got you.
I mean, mostly people just go in and create a witness slip. They don't actually do an account. There's two separate steps to that. And I've been trying to train people in that regard, but again, it doesn't encourage them to continue to use it when it's disregarded. So when we mobilize that many people to get involved and do this, they get completely disenfranchised when then their voice isn't heard. They're like, why did I bother?
yeah,
Why am I
exactly.
going to do this? So
Exactly.
that system is pretty basic. It's difficult to maneuver. It could be way better. It's super rudimentary, but it does exist on a basic level, and it should be more robust, and it should be listened to.
So it
And we
sounds
do
like we
have
need a tech
policy.
billionaire to help us create this.
Yeah, I mean, Nicole Shanahan could work wonders on all of this, right? I really am looking forward to maybe connecting with her on some of those build outs.
Well, you might want to ask Justin about the money in politics, because you guys don't go for the big PAC money. Is that something that the Greens have ever tried to figure out? Like, hey, why didn't we go for Bloomberg and let him take our party to places unknown way back then? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I don't know. We don't want to ever be in a position where we might be compromised and dependent on money that's going to demand we go this way or that way to keep the money coming. I mean, once you get on the hook, I think it can be hard to get off, and once you get dependent on that money,
Right.
we do
Like
have-
coffee in a habit.
we do make things, I guess, hard for ourselves in that way, but we're trying to walk the walk of the way we think democracy should be about ideas, and whoever has the best ideas should get to put those ideas out to the people, and then the person with the best ideas should win. And I think that there are ways of building that platform for democracy that we could, if we took public ownership of our democracy and said, okay, well, these are the candidates in the race, and they're all going to get equal airtime. They're all going to get equal. We're going to try and build a system where everyone has an equal chance to get heard. And then, instead of whoever's able to raise the most money is going to get heard more, then maybe then we could have a democracy that's really is about ideas. And we could really just see what people really think. And I don't know. So I don't know. That's what I would like to see. So we do call for public campaign financing. It's something that's been attempted in small bits. And I mean, it was attempted at the presidential level, and then it's largely been abandoned as people found, we can just get more money if we opt out of that. I always check off the box on my taxes, $3 for the presidential campaign fund. And, those matching funds, we did get some of them in the presidential race this year, but they held on to them. We qualified in the primary season for matching funds so that all donations up to $200 would get matched by federal money for donations that came during the primary period. But they held, once we submitted that application, they said we qualify, but then they said, well, we're not sure if we can pay you right away. We're worried if we have.
Yeah, they delayed you for a couple months on purpose.
They delayed us a tremendous amount of time, and then the money didn't come through till after the primary is over, and we can't spend the money during the election period, the general election. So we can only use that money now to pay off debts that were accrued during the primary season. Anyway, and they said, oh yeah, well, they rated that fund, that $3 checkbox fund. They gave away a lot of it. They gave it away to like the Secret Service and stuff. Congress passed a bill that there's too much money in this fund. Probably no one's going to need it. They decimated it. They rated that fund.
Nothing surprises us anymore what they'll do.
And this is why when the League of Women Voters did the forum, which I didn't get invited to, but when they did the forum for my district, they asked the question about whether or not Congress should do an ethics bill for the Supreme Court. And I was just, in some ways, I get kind of appalled by that question, because who made Congress the arbiter of ethics? Because they certainly are not, and they've made lots of bad appropriations, and they need to look themselves in the mirror and ask themselves every day if they're making ethical decisions, instead of out there trying to be the arbiter and police every other branch of government.
Exactly. If they accepted George Santos into their midst, I mean, that says a lot about Congress.
Yeah, but I agree with you on the money out of politics thing. We need to work on that. But unfortunately, I feel like all the bills that we've moved forward have really just made it harder for you and I mean, the small guy, right? Because you still have the big parties able to move millions of dollars in one shot over to a candidate. So that's not helpful.
So last week, we on our program here, we had people from Braver Angels, StoryCorps, Better Ballot, everybody from both sides talking to each other. Let me run off a check here and see whether you guys agree. So we have already talked about instant runoff voting. Most of us agree on that, right? How about Election Day holiday?
I'll go first.
Good.
I'll go first.
How about same day
Hang on,
voter
Hang on.
registration? You know about how that works?
Same day voter registration? Absolutely. Election Day holiday? I'm kind of wondering, because I voted today. We've been able to vote for a week and a half here in South Carolina. So,
Yeah, 800,000 people so far voted here. In
so
South Carolina.
I think the early voting, depending on, the corruption claims and everything.
Well, what did you do on Columbus Day? We don't really need Columbus Day. We can make election holiday where people come and have cookout party, like get to know their
you had to vote on
neighbors,
one day.
community.
If you had to vote on one day, absolutely.
Oh no, you still have early voting too, but give
But then I'm not invited to the barbecue.
Right now, only 50% are gonna vote this year anyway. I mean,
gonna
if
have
you
a
have a
cap,
holiday, if people are actually out of work, they will increase the number. Don't you guys think so?
I like the idea of 2 weeks of early voting, no more than that. We have like a month and a half here in Illinois, which is absurd.
Wow.
But 2 weeks of early voting and then a holiday at the end, a big party
Okay.
celebration where we really encourage everybody that hasn't gone out to get out there. I think that's optimal.
See, Angel has the best ideas out of all of us.
So Redpath was talking about proportional representation. You guys like that idea? What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, proportional representation. So, in a parliamentary system like they have in a lot of European countries, it's different, right? You vote for a party, and then, if your party has maybe 10% support, you get about 10% of the seats in the Congress and in the parliament. So that's the goal of proportional representation is you may share your views with only 5%, 10% of the voting public, but if you guys are there and you're 5 to 10%, why shouldn't you have 5 to 10% representation in the legislative body? That's the concept of proportional representation, which seems only fair. So then the only question is kind of how do you get there? How do you achieve proportional representation? What the reform that we've advocated in our platform is multi-member districts with ranked choice voting. So, for example,
Yeah, that's good.
Congress has, Connecticut has 5 seats in the legislature. They all go to Democrats, right? Because we're like
Right.
55, 60% Democrats or whatever. So they eke out the majority and then everything's gerrymandered and then they get all 5 seats. But maybe 40% of our state or something is Republican and they have no seats. I'm not Republican, but I can see that that's unfair, and I'm sure they feel it's unfair. Why shouldn't we be, if we're 60% Democrat and 40% Republican, why shouldn't we be 60-40 in our representation in Congress? And so the multi-member seats with ranked choice voting kind of solves the problem. So if you make everyone gets to vote for all the representatives. We're a small state. We only have 5. You could draw districts that have, say, 5 representatives per district. And then you rank them. And then there's a way of tabulating the votes so that if a person gets less 20% support, then they get one of those seats, one of those 5 seats. And if they, so if they don't get 20% support, then they won't get any of the seats. But it could be distributed more proportionally to the voting public. So that's the reform that we advocate as a way of getting more proportionality represented in Congress, and that could work at the town council level too, or the city council level as well.
Got 2 minutes left. Angel, give us
Well,
something.
what I wanted to just I like the idea, but I would challenge it from the perspective that honestly, if we had representatives that actually didn't have a particular ideology that they were married to, but their real job was to serve the voice as the voice of the people, and they were engaging their electorate, like I mentioned, and they were then drawing their decision making from the voice of the electorate, then we wouldn't have a lot of these problems. Right? A lot of
Good
this
point.
goes away because
Yeah.
then if your body says we want to do this, it's maybe not what I personally would do, but then I can justify it by saying, you know what? These are the people I represent and that's what they wanted me to do. Right?
Exactly.
And if I am getting voted on based on the ethical and moral standard that I am here to represent you, and I will do so in as just a manner as I can, then we don't need to worry so much about the party fairness.
You get the money out of it too. All you have to be is a robot at that point.
Well-
Just let the people vote.
Well, it's not so much letting the people vote because you still need representatives that are able to be really good problem solvers because and I don't know that AI
Yeah, true.
is there yet because you need to be able to then bring these things in and have innovative problem solving happening. And I really think that that's quite possible. I think you can take people of all those different ideologies and you can take all of the different needs of those individuals, sit down and negotiate out without becoming nasty. I think where we lose all of it in Congress is that we're so nasty during election cycle that people don't trust each other anymore and they can't actually sit down and have great conversation. So anyway,
We're at the end of the program. You guys have been fantastic. This has been an outstanding conversation. So how about we all go around? I'm gonna give my website, which is bettercandidates.org. Angel, where should people find you?
libertyangel.us or angeloakley.com.
Michael?
Well, I already gave mine, and you're ruining my whole thing. I had so much to say. However, Angel, I agree with you. I struggle with the thing that we were talking about prior to that.
We gotta go.
Go, Joe. I already gave it.
All right, Justin,
Justin.
Green.
justinforall.org, and you can email me justin@justinforall.org. That's with the numeric 4.
All right, thanks again for
You're
another
awesome,
episode.
Justin, and I'm going to be reaching out to you because there were other things I wanted to chat with you about.
Okay,
All
great.
right. Thanks again, guys.